A combat-wounded veteran takes a job as a janitor at a prestigious auto shop, hiding his extensive mechanical expertise earned during years of military service until an impossible repair challenge and a careless bet forces him to reveal skills that even he had forgotten. But in this high-end garage, where credentials and appearances determine worth, one empathetic shop owner sees beyond the limp and scars to recognize that sometimes the most valuable skills are found in those society has overlooked. This is a story about second chances and how expertise comes not just from formal training, but from the hard-won wisdom of overcoming life's toughest battles. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow we've saved something truly special for you. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Elite Performance Motors as Michael Sullivan swept the already immaculate floor of the service bay. The rhythmic motion aggravated the constant ache in his left leg, a permanent souvenir from an IED outside Fallujah. But he continued working steadily. At 42, Michael had learned to push through pain, both physical and otherwise. The high-end repair shop specialized in exotic and luxury vehicles, the kind of cars whose owners rarely spoke to the man who cleaned up the oil spills and emptied the trash. This suited Michael just fine. After 15 years in the Marines as a combat vehicle mechanic, followed by the explosion that ended his career and his marriage in quick succession, he preferred the simplicity of his current arrangement. Show up, clean up, collect his paycheck and go home to his small apartment, where the silence didn't feel quite so empty anymore. "Sullivan, there's a coffee spill in the customer lounge," called Jason Reed, the 30-something lead technician whose Ferrari red toolbox probably cost more than Michael's yearly salary. "And Mr. Donovan's dropping off his Maserati in 10 minutes. Make sure the reception area looks perfect." Michael nodded, leaning his broom against the wall and limping toward the supply closet for the necessary cleaning supplies. He didn't miss the way Jason rolled his eyes at his slow pace, nor the whispers that sometimes followed him around the shop. Why'd Davidson hire a cripple for a job that requires being on your feet all day? He'd overheard that particular sentiment more than once. Richard Davidson, the owner of Elite Performance, had indeed taken a chance hiring Michael 6 months ago when no one else would. The interview had been brief, almost perfunctory. "Military?" Davidson had asked, noticing Michael's limp and the way he automatically stood at attention. "Marines, sir. 15 years. Injured?" "Yes, sir. Honorable discharge 3 years ago." Davidson had studied him for a long moment, then said simply, "Start Monday, 7 a.m. sharp." No questions about his previous employment history, which consisted of a string of short-lived positions that always ended the same way. "We're restructuring," or "We've decided to go in a different direction." No one wanted to say outright that his limping gait made customers uncomfortable, or that his occasional 1,000-yard stare during loud noises didn't inspire confidence. Michael finished cleaning the coffee spill just as the distinctive rumble of an Italian sports car announced Alexander Donovan's arrival. Donovan was Elite's most valuable customer, a tech entrepreneur whose collection of exotic cars kept the shop in business during lean times. Michael quickly retreated to the shadows of the maintenance area as Davidson personally greeted Donovan. In the spotless reception area, "Alex, the Maserati again? What seems to be the problem this time?" Davidson's voice carried the perfect blend of deference and familiarity reserved for clients who spent 6 figures annually on vehicle maintenance. "She's making a strange noise during acceleration, and the computer's throwing some obscure code that my regular mechanic can't figure out," Donovan replied, tossing his keys carelessly onto the counter. "Need it fixed by Friday. I'm taking a potential investor for a spin, and it has to be perfect." "Friday might be tight," Davidson hedged, glancing toward the service area where 3 Porsches and a Bentley already occupied lifts. We're pretty backed up, and intermittent issues can be time-consuming to diagnose. I'll make it worth your while, Donovan insisted, his tone making it clear he wasn't accustomed to hearing no. Double your usual rate if it's ready by Friday? Morning. From his vantage point, Michael could see Jason and the other technicians exchange glances. Even at their expertise level, diagnosing an intermittent problem in 3 days on a car known for its temperamental electronics was a tall order. But no one was going to turn down that kind of premium. We'll do our absolute best, Davidson promised, as a young valet took the Maserati keys to park the sleek vehicle in the service bay. Michael returned to his sweeping, careful to stay out of the way as the technicians gathered around the newly arrived Maserati like surgeons preparing for a complicated procedure. He couldn't help but notice the distinctive sound when the engine started, a subtle irregularity in the exhaust note that triggered memories of similar issues he'd diagnosed in military vehicles, where strange noises often meant the difference between completing a mission and being stranded in hostile territory. For the next 2 days, Elite's top technicians worked on Donovan's Maserati with increasing frustration. Michael observed their progress while performing his duties, noting each diagnostic avenue they pursued and abandoned. They replaced sensors, checked fuel pressure, disassembled and inspected the variable valve timing system, and ran the computer diagnostic software repeatedly, all without resolving the intermittent hesitation and troubling error code. By Thursday afternoon, tension filled the shop. Davidson paced between the office and service bay, checking on progress and making increasingly anxious phone calls. Jason had resorted to colorful profanity as he leaned over the engine compartment, his expensive watch catching the fluorescent lights as he gestured in frustration. "It doesn't make any sense," he declared to the other mechanics gathered around. "Everything checks out individually. The computer says it's a fault in the timing system, but we've replaced every component, and the problem persists." Michael continued mopping nearby, keeping his head down even as his mind catalogued the symptoms and tests performed. During his military service, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to diagnose engine problems. Vehicles under his care had the highest operational readiness rates in his unit, a talent that had saved lives more than once when missions depended on reliable transportation. "What about that Italian mechanic in Portland?" Davidson suggested desperately. "We could have the car transported there overnight." "He's at a conference in Europe this week," Jason replied, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "I've tried everything. I know, Rich. Either we need more time, or we need to tell Donovan it can't be fixed by tomorrow." The shop fell silent. Disappointing Alexander Donovan wasn't just about losing the premium on this job. It could mean losing his entire collections. Maintenance contracts. Michael hesitated, then set his mop aside. Every instinct told him to stay invisible, to mind his business and collect his paycheck. Getting involved meant risking the only stable employment he'd found since coming home. But the problem nagging at the edge of his consciousness wouldn't. "Let go, sir," he said quietly, approaching Davidson. "I might know what's causing the issue." The entire shop seemed to freeze. Jason looked up with undisguised disbelief, while Davidson's expression wavered between surprise and irritation at the interruption. "Sullivan, we appreciate your enthusiasm," Davidson said carefully, "but this requires specialized expertise." "I understand, sir," Michael replied, already regretting speaking up. "Just thought I'd mention it." Jason snorted. "What's next? The lunch delivery guy giving surgical advice? Stick to your mop, old man." The dismissal stung, but Michael was used to being underestimated. He turned to resume his cleaning when Davidson suddenly called him back. "Wait, what do you think the problem is?" Michael hesitated, aware of the skeptical stares from the entire technical team. "Based on the sound and the specific code, I'd guess It's not an electrical or mechanical timing issue, but a harmonic resonance problem in the intake manifold. Probably a hairline crack that opens only under specific load conditions, throwing off the air-fuel ratio momentarily. The silence that followed was absolute until Jason broke it with a sharp laugh. Harmonic resonance? Where'd you get that? A YouTube video? Actually, I was a vehicle maintenance chief in the Marines, Michael said quietly, specialized in drivetrain and electronics troubleshooting. A military mechanic? Jason scoffed. No offense to our armed forces, but fixing Humvees doesn't exactly translate to Italian supercars. Davidson studied Michael thoughtfully. You seem pretty confident. Reasonably, sir. I'd need to check a few things to confirm. Jason folded his arms across his chest. This is ridiculous. We don't have time for amateur hour. We don't have time to ignore potentially useful input either, Davidson countered. He checked his watch. It's already 6. We've tried everything else and gotten nowhere. You can't seriously be considering letting the janitor work on Donovan's $250,000 car, Jason protested. Davidson's expression hardened. I'm considering all options to avoid disappointing our most valuable client. He turned to Michael. How long would you need to check your theory? 2 hours, maybe less. And you're confident you can identify the problem without damaging anything? Michael nodded. Yes, sir. Jason threw his hands up in disgust. This is insane. I'm not taking responsibility when this goes sideways. Tell you what, Davidson said, a sudden glint in his eye. Let's make this interesting. Jason, you're so certain Sullivan is wrong. Care to put money on it? What? Jason looked incredulous. A friendly wager. If Sullivan can diagnose and fix the problem by morning, you cover the shop's Friday lunch order. If he can't, I cover it for a month. Jason's expression shifted from outrage to smug confidence. Make it 2 months of lunches and you've got a deal. Done, Davidson agreed, then turned to Michael. Sullivan, you have until morning. The shop is yours after closing. I'll arrange for security to let you stay. Don't make me regret this. As the technicians began closing up shop for the day, Michael could feel their skeptical glances. Jason made a show of carefully securing his tools, as if protecting them from contamination. Just so we're clear, Jason said as he prepared to leave, even if by some miracle you figure out what's wrong, don't actually try to fix it. Diagnose only. Some of us have actual certifications and professional reputations to maintain. Michael nodded, his focus already turning to the task ahead. As the last employee left and the security guard acknowledged the special arrangement, Michael found himself alone with the troublesome Maserati. For the first time in years, he felt a familiar surge of purpose, the same feeling he'd had when faced with a broken-down vehicle in hostile territory, with lives depending on his skills. He rolled up his sleeves and limped toward the toolbox that Davidson had authorized him to use. The expensive diagnostic computer would help, but Michael trusted his senses first. The way the engine sounded, the vibrations he could feel through his fingertips, the subtle sense that might indicate where the problem originated. As midnight approached, Michael methodically eliminated possible causes, his mind fully engaged in a way it hadn't been since before the explosion that had changed his life. He forgot about his aching leg, forgot about the dismissive attitudes, forgot about everything except the puzzle before him. In this moment, he wasn't a broken veteran or a janitor. He was simply a mechanic doing what he was born to do. The first light of dawn was seeping through the high windows of Elite Performance Motors when Richard Davidson arrived, coffee in hand and apprehension in his stride. He'd spent a restless night questioning his decision to let an untested janitor work on an extremely valuable client's vehicle. His career had been built on calculated risks, but this one felt particularly reckless in the cold light of morning. The security guard greeted him with an unexpected grin. "Your new guy's something else, Mr. Davidson. Been here all night. Never seen anyone so focused." Davidson nodded absently and made his way to the service bay, mentally preparing his apology to Alexander Donovan. What he found instead stopped him in his tracks. Michael Sullivan sat on a rolling stool beside the Maserati, his prosthetic leg partially visible beneath his rolled-up pant leg, where he'd adjusted it for comfort during the night. The floor around him was meticulously organized with parts and tools, each grouped logically as if preparing for inspection. The intake manifold lay disassembled on a clean shop cloth, and beside it sat what appeared to be a small section of the composite material, separated from the whole. "Sullivan?" Davidson approached cautiously. Michael looked up, exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, but a quiet satisfaction evident in his expression. He straightened automatically, military bearing asserting itself even after years of civilian life. "Good morning, sir. I've identified and repaired the issue." Davidson stared at the disassembled parts with equal parts hope and horror. "You took apart the intake system on a Maserati Gran Turismo without authorization? You authorized me to diagnose and fix the problem, sir," Michael replied evenly. "It was exactly what I suspected. Microscopic fracture in the intake manifold, only opening under specific load and temperature conditions. Created an air leak that confused the mass airflow sensor readings." He pointed to the small piece he'd removed. "Had to fabricate a reinforcement plate from some scrap aluminum to permanently seal the crack after repairing it with high-temperature epoxy. It's better than new now. Won't develop the same stress point again." Davidson set his coffee down and leaned in to examine the work. Despite his limited technical knowledge, even he could appreciate the precision evident in the repair. "Have you tested it?" "Yes, sir. Took it around the block twice at 0530. Problems completely resolved. No error codes, no hesitation during acceleration, and the exhaust note is properly balanced now." Michael gestured to the diagnostic computer showing a clean readout. "I've documented everything in the service record." Davidson picked up the tablet and scrolled through Sullivan's detailed notes, marveling at the technical expertise they reflected. The documentation was more thorough than anything his certified technicians typically produced, complete with reference diagrams, stress analysis explanations, and even thermal expansion calculations that justified the repair approach. "Where did you learn to document like this?" Davidson asked. "Military maintenance protocols, sir. When lives depend on vehicle reliability, detailed documentation ensures consistent repairs and helps identify systemic issues before they become critical." Failures. The shop door opened as the day shift began arriving. Jason Reed entered first, his confident stride faltering when he saw Michael and Davidson standing beside the disassembled Maserati. "What the hell happened here?" Jason demanded, rushing forward. "Did he damage it? I told him not to touch anything beyond diagnostics." "Actually," Davidson said slowly, "he found and fixed the problem." Jason looked from Davidson to Michael and back again, disbelief evident in his expression. "That's impossible." "What was it?" "Hairline fracture in the intake manifold, just like he predicted." Davidson handed Jason the tablet with Michael's documentation. "Harmonic resonance at specific RPM ranges caused it to open and close, creating an intermittent air leak." Jason scanned the documentation, his skepticism gradually giving way to grudging surprise. "This actually makes sense. But these materials calculations and this stress analysis?" He looked up at Michael with new eyes. "Where did you learn this? Level of engineering?" "Military field experience combined with necessity," Michael answered simply. "When you're responsible for keeping a convoy moving through hostile territory with limited resources, you learn to understand systems deeply and improvise effectively." The other technicians were gathering now, drawn by the unusual scene of their janitor being at the center of attention. Davidson watched their expressions shift from amusement to curiosity as Jason reluctantly confirmed the validity of the diagnosis and repair. "So I guess I'm buying lunch today," Jason said, attempting to sound casual, though the admission clearly cost him some pride. Davidson checked his watch. "Donovan will be here in 2 hours. Let's get this intake system reassembled and the car cleaned for delivery. Sullivan, since you've been up all night, you can take the day off with pay after Mr. Donovan collects his vehicle." "Thank you, sir, but I'd prefer to finish my regular shift," Michael replied. "I just need to clean up here, and then I'll get back to my usual duties." There was an awkward silence as everyone processed this response. Here was a man who had just demonstrated exceptional technical skill, yet was preparing to pick up his mop and résumé cleaning floors. "Sullivan," Davidson said carefully, "would you step into my office for a moment?" As they walked to the office, Michael was acutely aware of the stares following him. The past night's work had exposed a part of himself he'd carefully kept hidden, not just his technical abilities, but the person he'd been before the explosion that had taken part of his leg and all of his confidence. Davidson closed the office door and motioned for Michael to sit. 15 years as a vehicle maintenance chief in the Marines, and you've been pushing a broom in my shop for 6 months without saying a word about your qualifications." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "The janitorial position was what was available, sir, but surely with your skills you could have found work as a mechanic somewhere." Michael's gaze dropped to his prosthetic. "I tried. No one wants a mechanic who can't stand for a full shift without pain, who needs to sit occasionally, who might have a flashback if a backfire sounds too much like an IED." His voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. "Most shops took one look at the limp and saw liability, not capability." Davidson leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him with new understanding. "So you took whatever job you could get?" "Yes, sir. After my discharge, things fell apart pretty quickly. My wife couldn't handle the changes, the physical limitations, the nightmares, the adjustment to civilian life. Can't blame her, really. Then the house went into foreclosure when I couldn't find steady work." Michael met Davidson's gaze directly. "Your janitor job posting said veteran-friendly. That's rare enough that I didn't want to risk it by asking for more than was offered." For the first time, Davidson felt a twinge of shame for never having inquired further about Michael's background. He'd prided himself on hiring a veteran, yet had never bothered to learn anything about the man's actual skills or experiences. "What was your full role in the Marines?" Davidson asked. "Motor Transport Maintenance Chief," Michael answered. "Responsible for maintaining and repairing all vehicles in our battalion, everything from Humvees to heavy transports to specialized equipment. Before that, I was in advanced vehicle electronics and diagnostics. Graduated top of my class in the military's advanced troubleshooting program." And after the injury, Michael's jaw tightened slightly. 8 months of rehabilitation learning, to walk with the prosthetic, honorable discharge with full disability recognition, but sitting around collecting benefits wasn't an option for me. I needed to work, to contribute something. So here we are. Davidson nodded thoughtfully. The pieces were coming together. The military bearing, the meticulous attention to detail in his cleaning work, the way Michael always arrived 15 minutes early for his shift and stayed until every task was completed, regardless of time. "We have a decision to make," Davidson said finally. "In about 90 minutes, Alexander Donovan is going to arrive expecting disappointment based on my cautious phone call yesterday. Instead, he'll find his car performing better than it has in months. He's going to ask how we fixed what other shops couldn't." Michael said nothing, waiting for Davidson to continue. "I could take credit or give it to Jason and the team. That would be the simplest approach." Davidson watched Michael carefully as he spoke. "Or I could tell him the truth," That the solution came from an unexpected source. That would be more complicated, but also more honest. "I don't need credit, sir," Michael said quietly. "I'm just glad I could help." "This isn't just about credit for one repair job, Sullivan. It's about recognizing talent and utilizing it properly." Davidson leaned forward. "I'm offering you a choice. You can continue as our janitor if that's what you prefer, or you can join our technical team as a diagnostic specialist, effective immediately." Michael blinked, the offer catching him completely off guard. "Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm not certified for luxury vehicles. I don't have the formal training your other techs have." "Certifications can be arranged. Training can be provided." Davidson waved away the concern. "What I can't teach is the intuitive understanding of systems and the problem-solving ability you demonstrated last night. Those come from experience and natural aptitude." For the first time in their conversation, Michael seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Davidson continued, pressing his advantage while the idea was still taking shape. "We'd start you on diagnostics, specifically the challenging cases that have the other techs stumped. You'd work directly with me, and we'd create accommodations for your physical needs. A specialized workstation, scheduled breaks, whatever makes the job sustainable for you." "Why would you do this?" Michael asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Davidson replied simply. "I know you're the first person who's been able to diagnose that particular issue with Donovan's car. I know you stayed all night to fix a problem that wasn't even your responsibility. And I know talent when I see it, even when it's been hiding behind a mop." Michael stared out the office window toward the service bay, where the techs were carefully reassembling the Maserati's intake system, following his detailed instructions. For the first time since returning home, he allowed himself to consider a future that included more than just survival, one that might actually utilize the skills and knowledge he'd spent years developing. "I'd need some accommodations," he said finally. "The prosthetic requires maintenance, and there are days when the pain is worse than others." "We'll work with whatever you need," Davidson assured him. "I'm not expecting superhuman performance. Just the same dedication and problem-solving you've already demonstrated." A small smile, perhaps the first genuine one Davidson had seen, tugged at the corner of Michael's mouth. "In that case, sir, I accept." The office door opened after a quick knock, and Jason appeared, looking uncharacteristically respectful. "Maseratis, back together and running perfectly. I've never heard it sound so smooth, actually. Whatever Sullivan did to that intake system, it's better than factory spec now." Davidson raised an eyebrow at Michael, who simply shrugged. The factory design didn't account for the specific harmonics created by the aftermarket exhaust Mr. Donovan had installed. The reinforcement plate I added dampens those vibrations. Jason shook his head in reluctant admiration. "I've been working on that car for 2 years and never made that connection." He hesitated, then added, "The team and I were talking. If you're considering keeping Sullivan in a technical role, we'd be on board with that. Anyone who can diagnose what he did deserves a spot on the floor." Davidson nodded, pleased that at least some of the potential friction was resolving itself before it began. "As it happens, Sullivan has just accepted a position as our new diagnostic specialist. I trust you and the team will help bring him up to speed on our specific systems and clients." Jason's expression registered surprise, followed by acceptance. "Of course. Actually, there's a Mercedes SL65 coming in this afternoon that's been giving us fits. Intermittent electrical issues that don't register on the standard diagnostics. Might be a good first official case." "That would be fine," Michael agreed, his voice steady despite the monumental shift occurring in his life. "Though I'll need to clean the service bay first. It's still my responsibility until you hire a new janitor." Both Davidson and Jason stared at him for a moment before Davidson broke into laughter. Your dedication is admirable, Sullivan, but I think we can find someone to handle the cleaning. Right now, I need you to help explain this miracle repair to Alexander Donovan, who just pulled into the parking lot. Through the office window, they could see the sleek Tesla that Donovan preferred for daily driving. The tech entrepreneur emerged, designer sunglasses catching the morning light as he approached the entrance with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to the world conforming to his expectations. "Just be yourself," Davidson advised as they prepared to greet their most valuable client. "Let your work speak for itself." As they walked toward the reception area, Michael straightened his shoulders and adjusted his gait to minimize his limp, an automatic response to entering a situation where judgment would be swift and potentially harsh. But halfway across the shop floor, he consciously relaxed his stride, allowing his natural movement to return. If this new chapter was going to work, it would have to be on terms that acknowledge both his abilities and his limitations. Davidson noticed the subtle change and nodded approvingly. Together, they went to meet Donovan, the highly respected boss and his newly discovered mechanical savant, about to reveal how an overnight gamble had transformed not just a problematic sports car, but potentially the future of elite performance. Motors itself. Alexander Donovan swept into elite performance motors with the confident stride of a man accustomed to disappointment being someone else's problem. His perfectly tailored suit and casual demeanor projected successful indifference, but Davidson knew his client well enough to recognize the subtle tension in his jawline. Donovan needed this car working perfectly for his investor meeting, and he was prepared for bad news. "Richard," Donovan greeted with practiced warmth, extending his hand. "Tell me you've worked a miracle." "Actually, we have," Davidson replied, shaking his hand firmly. "But the credit belongs to our diagnostic specialist, Michael Sullivan." Davidson gestured to Michael, who stood slightly behind him. To his credit, Donovan barely registered the prosthetic leg visible beneath Michael's work pants, instead focusing on his face with the sharp assessment of someone used to evaluating talent. "You fixed it?" Donovan asked directly. "Yes, sir," Michael answered with the crisp certainty that 15 years in the military had ingrained in him. Hairline fracture in the intake manifold, causing an intermittent air leak under specific load conditions. "We've repaired and reinforced the system. It's performing above factory specifications now." Donovan raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting more technical jargon or qualifying statements. When Michael offered nothing further, he turned back to Davidson. "Just like that? After 3 other shops couldn't figure it out? Why don't you take it for a test drive and judge for yourself?" Davidson suggested, nodding to Jason, who brought forward the keys. The 3 men walked to where the Maserati waited, its gleaming black paint reflecting the morning light. Michael limped slightly on his prosthetic, the night's work having taken a toll on his residual limb, but he kept pace with determined dignity. Donovan slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The rich purr that resulted was noticeably smoother than the day before, the subtle irregularity completely absent. His eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of his surprise. "I'll be back in 15 minutes, he said, closing the door and pulling away with controlled acceleration. Michael and Davidson watched the Maserati disappear down the street, its exhaust note perfectly balanced now. "He's impressed," Davidson observed. "Doesn't show it much, but I can tell." "The proof will be in the hard acceleration," Michael replied. "That's when the problem was most noticeable before." They returned to the shop where the morning's regular customers were beginning to arrive. Michael found himself in an awkward limbo, no longer the invisible janitor, not yet officially a technician. He instinctively picked up a broom to sweep around a newly arrived BMW, only to have Jason gently take it from his hands. "That's not your job anymore," Jason reminded him. "Why don't you show me those calculations you did on the intake harmonics, while we wait for Donovan?" The genuine interest caught Michael off guard. He'd grown so accustomed to being overlooked that recognition felt almost uncomfortable. Nevertheless, he followed Jason to a workstation and began explaining his approach to diagnosing the Maserati's issue. Several other technicians drifted over, initially keeping their distance, but gradually drawn into the discussion as Michael sketched out vibration patterns and explained how military vehicles had taught him to identify problems through sound and feel when sophisticated diagnostics weren't available. "We rely too much on the computers sometimes," admitted Carlos Vega, the shop's youngest technician. "My grandfather was a mechanic in Cuba. He could diagnose an engine problem just by listening with a long screwdriver pressed to his ear. I always thought that was old-school magic, but you're saying there's actual science to it?" "It's both," Michael explained, warming to the subject. "The science is understanding how different components create specific frequencies when they operate, correctly or incorrectly. The art is training your ear to recognize those patterns instinctively." Their impromptu seminar was interrupted by the distinctive sound of the Maserati returning. Donovan parked directly in front of the shop's entrance, rather than in the client's space. A small but telling breach of protocol that suggested urgency. He emerged from the vehicle with an expression Davidson had never seen before. Genuine. Amazement poorly concealed beneath his cultivated nonchalance. "I pushed it to 120 on the highway access road," Donovan announced without preamble. "Not a hint of hesitation. It hasn't run this smoothly since I bought it." He turned to Michael, reassessing him completely. "You really fixed what 3 specialized shops couldn't diagnose?" "Yes, sir," Michael confirmed simply. "How? What did they miss?" Michael considered how to explain without sounding condescending to the other professionals who had attempted repairs. They were looking for electronic or mechanical timing issues because that's what the diagnostic computer suggested. But the computer can only interpret data based on its programming. Sometimes you need to step back and consider the entire system as an integrated whole. "You did this overnight," Donovan pressed. "The diagnosis and repair took approximately 7 hours," Michael acknowledged. "The documentation took another hour." Donovan looked at Davidson. "And he's your diagnostic specialist. I've been bringing my cars here for 3 years and never met him." Davidson cleared his throat. "As of this morning, yes. Previously, Michael was—" He hesitated, but opted for straightforward honesty. "Our janitor." A startled silence followed this revelation. Donovan stared at Davidson, then at Michael, then back to Davidson. "Your janitor fixed my Maserati." The question held equal parts disbelief and amusement. "Mr. Sullivan has extensive experience as a military vehicle maintenance chief," Davidson explained quickly. 15 years with the Marines before an injury led to his discharge. We only recently discovered his exceptional mechanical abilities." "How recently?" Donovan's sharp business instincts were clearly engaged now. "Last night," Davidson admitted, "when our regular team couldn't solve the problem, Sullivan identified the likely cause based just on the engine sound and error codes. I took a chance and let him investigate." Donovan's laugh was sudden and genuine, a rare sound from the normally reserved businessman. "That's either the worst management I've ever heard of or the best. Hiding your top talent pushing a broom while your certified technicians were stumped." He shook his head in amazement. "Only in America." Michael remained impassive, though the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Donovan stepped closer to him, all traces of condescension gone. "Military, huh? Which branch?" "Marines, sir. Motor Transport Maintenance Battalion. My father was Army 1st Cavalry Division," Donovan said, his tone shifting subtly. "He always said the best mechanics were the ones who had to fix things when lives depended on it. Guess he was right." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your service and for saving my investor meeting." Michael shook the offered hand firmly. "You're welcome, sir." Donovan turned back to Davidson. "Bill me whatever you want for this one, Richard. It was worth it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Michael. "And you, I have a collection of vehicles that regularly confound conventional mechanics. I'd appreciate direct access to your expertise in the future." After Donovan departed, Davidson clapped Michael on the shoulder. "Congratulations. You just earned the shop a premium client for life and yourself a powerful advocate." He surveyed the service floor, where the other technicians were trying to pretend they hadn't been watching the entire exchange. "Let's make this transition official. Team meeting in 5 minutes." While Davidson retreated to his office to prepare, Jason approached, Michael with a mix of grudging respect and lingering pride. "That was impressive," he acknowledged, "but Maseratis are your specialty, I take it." "No more than any other vehicle," Michael replied honestly. "Mechanical principles remain consistent across platforms. The fundamentals I learned on military diesels apply to luxury sports cars, with some adaptation." Jason looked skeptical. "There's a significant difference between a Humvee and a hand-built Italian sports car." "In refinement and purpose, absolutely," Michael agreed. "In basic operational physics, less than you might think. Both convert fuel energy to mechanical motion through controlled explosions. Both require precisely timed valve operations and air-fuel mixtures. Both create vibrations that tell stories about their operational status." Before Jason could respond, Davidson emerged from his office and called everyone to gather. The shop's 8 technicians formed a loose semicircle, with Michael standing awkwardly to one side until Davidson motioned him forward. "As some of you have already witnessed, we've discovered an exceptional talent that was hiding in plain sight," Davidson began. "Michael Sullivan will be joining our technical team, effective immediately as our diagnostic specialist, focusing on challenging cases that require his unique problem-solving approach." The reactions varied, from Carlos's enthusiastic nodding to a few uncertain glances among the more senior technicians. Jason maintained a neutral expression, though his posture suggested tension. "I understand this is unexpected," Davidson continued. "Sullivan brings different qualifications than our typical hiring path. He doesn't have the dealer certifications most of you earned. What he does have is 15 years of military vehicle maintenance experience in high-pressure environments, including advanced systems, diagnostics training, and leadership as a maintenance chief." He paused, gauging the room's response. "The reality of our business is results. Sullivan proved his capabilities by solving in one night what our conventional approaches couldn't resolve in 2 days. That's not a criticism of anyone's skills. It's a recognition that different perspectives have value." "What exactly will his role be?" asked Marcus Wheeler, a senior technician with 20 years of experience. "Are we all reporting to him now?" "No," Davidson clarified. "This isn't a hierarchical change. Sullivan will focus primarily on diagnostic challenges, the vehicles that come in with issues we struggle to identify. He'll work alongside all of you, not above you. I expect everyone to share knowledge in both directions." Davidson glanced at Michael. "Sullivan also has physical accommodations we'll be implementing. He'll need seated workstations for certain tasks and scheduled breaks to manage his prosthetic. I expect full cooperation in ensuring these needs are met without comment." The mention of accommodations caused several technicians to look at Michael's prosthetic with new understanding. Military service carried weight in this room. Several had family members who had served, and Marcus himself was a Navy veteran. "Any questions?" Davidson asked. "When do we start?" Carlos asked eagerly. "Because I've got a 2022 Audi RS7 with a phantom electrical drain that's driving me crazy." A ripple of laughter broke the tension. Marcus nodded respectfully toward Michael. "Welcome to the team. Any friend of the Corps is welcome here." Coming from the senior technician, the acceptance carried significant weight. Jason stepped forward. "As I mentioned earlier, there's a Mercedes SL65 scheduled this afternoon with electrical gremlins. I've been working on it for 2 weeks without resolution. I'd appreciate a fresh perspective. The request, though professionally phrased, clearly cost him some pride. "I'd be happy to assist," Michael replied with equal professionalism, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. As the meeting dispersed and the technicians returned to their work, Davidson pulled Michael aside. "Not everyone's convinced yet," he said quietly. "Jason and a couple of the others will need time to adjust. Your work will speak for itself, but be prepared for some resistance." "I'm used to proving myself, sir," Michael assured him. "First female commanding officer I served under faced 10 times the skepticism. She earned respect by being competently uncompromising, neither aggressive nor apologetic. I learned a lot from her approach." Davidson nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the attitude I'm looking for. Now, let's get you set up properly. You'll need a workstation, tools, shop credentials." As they walked toward what would become Michael's area, Davidson continued outlining the transition plans. Michael listened attentively while surveying the shop with new eyes, not as the man who cleaned it, but as someone who might contribute meaningfully to its success. The change was happening so rapidly that it scarcely felt real. Just 12 hours ago, he'd been invisibly sweeping floors, carrying the weight of unused knowledge and unacknowledged skill. Now he stood on the precipice of a new chapter he hadn't dared imagine possible. Near the parts counter, he noticed the broom he'd abandoned the night before, still leaning against the wall. For a brief moment, his fingers twitched with the instinct to retrieve it, to retreat to the safety of low expectations and invisibility. Instead, he deliberately turned away and focused on Davidson's explanation of the computer systems he'd be authorized to access. The broom would be someone else's responsibility now. His hands had more important work to do. By the end of his first week as Elite Performance Motors diagnostic specialist, Michael Sullivan had established a new rhythm to his days. He arrived at 6:30 each morning, the early bird habit of military service impossible to break, and prepared his workspace methodically. The shop had quickly adapted to accommodate his needs with a specialized lift chair that allowed him to transition between standing and sitting positions without strain, and a rolling workstation that kept essential tools within easy reach. Davidson had given him a small office adjacent to the service floor, formerly a storage room now converted with a desk, computer terminal, and most importantly, a comfortable chair where Michael could periodically remove his prosthetic to manage discomfort during long shifts. The privacy also provided space to work through occasional moments when loud sounds triggered unwelcome memories of combat. The technical team's acceptance had progressed unevenly but steadily. Carlos had become an eager apprentice, regularly seeking Michael's insights and absorbing his methodical approach to diagnostics. Marcus offered gruff respect between sparse words, the shared understanding of military service creating an unspoken bond. Even Jason had begun consulting Michael on difficult cases, his initial skepticism gradually eroding in the face of consistent results. On this particular morning, Michael arrived to find the shop already bustling with activity despite the early hour. An exotic collection of vehicles filled the service bays: a Ferrari 488, 2 Lamborghinis, a vintage Porsche 911, and an Aston Martin Valkyrie that even Michael had only seen in magazines. "What's happening?" he asked Carlos, who was carefully maneuvering the Ferrari onto a lift. "Donovan," Carlos replied with a grin, "called Davidson yesterday afternoon. He's hosting some kind of supercar rally for his tech buddies this weekend and wants all his vehicles inspected and tuned. Plus, he recommended us to his friends." He nodded toward the Aston Martin. "That beauty belongs to some venture capital guy from Silicon Valley. Jason's practically drooling over the chance to work on it." Michael nodded, understanding the shop's excitement. These vehicles represented both significant immediate revenue and potential long-term client relationships, exactly the high-end business Davidson had been trying to attract. "Sullivan!" Davidson called, emerging from his office with unusual energy for the early hour. "Got a minute?" In the office, Davidson closed the door and gestured for Michael to sit. "Quite a display out there, isn't it?" "Impressive," Michael agreed. "Donovan's influence?" "Entirely," Davidson confirmed. "After you fixed his Maserati, he apparently told all his tech mogul friends about the mechanical savant we have on staff." He leaned back in his chair, studying. Michael with undisguised satisfaction. "In 1 week, you've generated more high-value client interest than our last 3 marketing campaigns combined." Michael shifted uncomfortably under the praise. "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, your job is about to expand." Davidson pushed a folder across the desk. "Donovan called specifically for you to personally inspect his Bugatti Chiron before the rally. It's being delivered at noon." Michael blinked in surprise. The Bugatti represented mechanical engineering at its absolute pinnacle, a 16-cylinder masterpiece worth over $3 million. "I've never worked on a Bugatti before," he admitted. "None of us have," Davidson replied. "They're usually serviced exclusively at certified Bugatti facilities. The fact that Donovan is trusting us, trusting you specifically, with this vehicle is significant." Michael opened the folder to find printouts of the Bugatti's technical specifications and service requirements. The complexity was breathtaking, but the underlying principles remained consistent with his understanding of high-performance engines. "I'll need to study these thoroughly before it arrives," he said, already mentally cataloguing the specialized tools they might need. "Already ordered the factory diagnostic software," Davidson assured him. "It should arrive by courier within the hour. This is an opportunity to establish ourselves in an entirely new tier of service." As Michael left the office with the specifications folder, he noticed Jason watching him from beside the Aston Martin. The lead technician's expression was unreadable, but the slight stiffening of his shoulders suggested the news about the Bugatti had already spread. For the next few hours, Michael immersed himself in preparation, reviewing the Bugatti's systems and technical requirements with meticulous attention. He was so absorbed that he barely registered the increasing activity around him until Carlos tapped his shoulder. "It's here," Carlos said reverently, nodding toward the large entrance doors. Michael looked up to see a transport truck carefully backing into the service entry. 4 technicians, including Jason, had stopped working to watch. Even the shop's new janitor, a college student named Trevor, paused his sweeping to stare. The truck's hydraulic platform lowered slowly, revealing a breathtaking Bugatti Chiron in midnight blue with subtle silver accents. The vehicle looked less like a car and more like a mechanical work of art, every curve and component designed for both beauty and extraordinary performance. The delivery driver approached with an electronic clipboard. "I need a signature from Michael Sullivan specifically," he announced, consulting his paperwork. "Mr. Donovan's instructions." Michael limped forward, acutely aware of the attention focused on him. He signed the delivery confirmation, and the driver handed over a sealed envelope with Donovan's corporate logo. "Mr. Donovan asked me to deliver this personally," the driver explained. His exact words were, "Make sure Sullivan gets this directly." Inside the envelope, Michael found a handwritten note. "Sullivan, the Chiron developed a strange vibration at high speeds during my last track day. 3 Bugatti technicians claim nothing is wrong, but I can feel it above 100 cm. If you solve this one, there's a significant bonus involved. Trust your instincts. Donovan." The vote of confidence from someone of Donovan's stature was unexpected. As the transport driver departed and the Bugatti sat gleaming under the shop lights, Michael felt the weight of all eyes upon him. "All right," he said, assuming the calm authority that had served him well during military crises. "Let's establish a protocol for this inspection. Carlos, can you prepare Bay 3 with clean floor coverings? Marcus, we'll need the specialized Diagnostic equipment Davidson ordered. Jason... He hesitated, then continued. Given your experience with high-performance vehicles, I'd appreciate your assistance with the initial assessment. The intentional inclusion caught Jason by surprise. He nodded slowly, professional interest overriding any lingering resentment. I've read about their unique cooling system. We should pay special attention to that. With roles assigned, the team moved with efficient purpose, treating the Bugatti with the reverence it commanded. Michael observed with satisfaction as the technicians naturally organized themselves into a collaborative unit, each contributing according to their strengths. For the next 2 hours, they conducted the most thorough inspection elite performance had ever performed. Michael moved methodically from system to system, occasionally sitting on his specialized chair when the prosthetic began to ache, but never pausing the careful examination. The factory diagnostic shows everything within normal parameters, Carlos reported, studying the specialized software program they'd connected. Just like Donovan said, the Bugatti technicians found nothing, Michael mused, but he feels something at high speed, and Donovan doesn't strike me as the type to imagine problems. We can't exactly test it at 180 miles per hour, Jason pointed out. No, Michael agreed, but we can simulate load conditions. He stared thoughtfully at the magnificent vehicle for a long moment, then slowly lowered himself to the ground despite the discomfort it caused his leg. What are you doing? Marcus asked. Sometimes you need a different perspective, Michael replied, positioning himself beneath the chassis. Hand me that inspection mirror and light, please. For 15 minutes, Michael examined the Bugattis, underside with methodical precision, periodically requesting different angles of illumination. Finally, he emerged, grimacing slightly as he used his workstation to pull himself up. There, he said, pointing to a nearly invisible irregularity on one of the aerodynamic panels. The Kevlar diffuser has a minor delamination. You can barely see it at rest, but under high-speed airflow it would create exactly the vibration Donovan described. Jason crouched to examine the area Michael had indicated. That's incredibly subtle. How did you spot that? In Afghanistan, we once had a transport helicopter with unexplained vibration during certain flight maneuvers, Michael explained. Turned out to be a similar composite material issue, nearly invisible until it reached specific stress points. After losing one aircraft, we developed enhanced inspection protocols for detecting early delamination. Can we fix it? Davidson asked, having joined them partway through the inspection. Yes, Michael confirmed. It requires specialized epoxy and curing methods to maintain the structural integrity of the composite material. I'll need to check. If the specifics for this application are different from what I've worked with before, I've actually completed the Bugatti carbon fiber certification course, Jason offered unexpectedly. It was part of an advanced training program last year. Never thought I'd get to use it. Michael nodded appreciatively. Perfect. Would you be willing to lead the repair process while I continue diagnostics on the rest of the vehicle? The collaborative approach, acknowledging Jason's specialized training while maintaining Michael's diagnostic lead, struck exactly the right balance. Jason's expression revealed both surprise and satisfaction at being recognized for his expertise. Absolutely, he agreed. We'll need to order the proprietary resin system. It's not something we stock. Already on it, Davidson said, clearly pleased with the teamwork developing before his eyes. I'll have it expedited. Excellent work, everyone. Especially you, Sullivan. Finding that defect might have just established our reputation at an entirely new level. As the team dispersed to prepare for the actual repair, Michael remained beside the Bugatti, making detailed notes about the inspection process. His concentration was so complete that he didn't immediately notice Jason approach until the lead technician cleared his throat. That was impressive, Jason said, gesturing toward the identified defect. I would have missed it completely. Different experiences lead to different perspectives, Michael replied diplomatically. Your carbon fiber certification will be crucial for the repair. An awkward silence stretched between them before Jason spoke again. Look, I've been less than welcoming this past week. Old habits. When you've spent years building your reputation as the go-to guy, it's hard when someone new changes the dynamics. I understand, Michael said simply. Military units face the same challenge when integrating new specialists. Initial resistance is natural. Natural, but not particularly professional, Jason acknowledged with unexpected self-awareness. Anyway, I wanted to say that your work is exceptional. The way you approached this inspection was educational. The admission clearly didn't come easily to Jason, making it all the more significant. Michael recognized it as a potential turning point in their working relationship. I've learned something from everyone here, he offered genuinely. Your electrical diagnostics on the Mercedes last week showed techniques I hadn't encountered before. Different backgrounds give us complementary skills. Jason nodded, seeming to appreciate the reciprocal recognition. Davidson wants us to document today's inspection process as a new protocol for exotic vehicles. Would you have time to review my draft when it's ready? Make sure we capture your methodology correctly? I'd be happy to, Michael agreed, recognizing the collaboration request as the olive branch it was intended to be. Their conversation was interrupted by Davidson's return with news that the specialized resin system would arrive by private courier. Within 3 hours. Donovan's arranged for it himself, he explained. Apparently, he has connections with the Bugatti factory. He's also requested a video call when we complete the repair to explain what we found. A call with Donovan and potentially Bugatti representatives? Jason raised an eyebrow. That's high. Visibility for the shop. For all of us, Davidson agreed, his expression making it clear that the credit would be properly shared. Sullivan's diagnostic find, combined with your certification expertise, creates exactly the specialized service proposition I've been trying to build for years. As they discussed logistics for completing the repair, Michael felt a subtle shift in the shop's atmosphere. The initial novelty of his presence had evolved into something more sustainable, professional respect based on demonstrated ability rather than curiosity about his unusual background. Even more encouraging was the emerging sense of complementary teamwork rather than competitive hierarchy. By late afternoon, the specialized resin had arrived, and Jason led the delicate repair process with Michael observing closely. The procedure required exacting temperature control and precise application techniques to maintain the Bugatti's stringent structural specifications. Throughout the repair, Jason explained each step to Carlos and 2 other technicians, sharing his specialized knowledge just as Michael had been sharing his diagnostic approach. The factory considers this a proprietary technique, Jason explained as he carefully applied the final layer. That's why the certification process is so restrictive. There are only about 60 technicians in the country authorized to perform carbon fiber work on Bugattis. And now Elite Performance has one of them, Davidson noted with satisfaction. Combined with Sullivan's diagnostic capabilities, we're positioned uniquely in the market. When the repair was complete and the resin properly cured under controlled conditions, they conducted another full diagnostic scan that confirmed all systems were operating within specifications. Davidson scheduled the video call with Donovan for the following morning to allow the resin to achieve maximum strength before road testing. As the day wound down and technicians began cleaning their work areas, Michael organized his notes on the Bugatti inspection for the morning presentation. Despite the exhaustion of the long and intensely focused day, he felt a profound sense of satisfaction that had been absent during his years of post-military struggle. "Drinks at Mackenzie's," Jason announced as the shop prepared to close. Sullivan's diagnostic save deserves a proper celebration. First round's on me. The invitation, casual yet significant, represented full acceptance into the shop's social fabric. Michael hesitated, memories of his post-injury isolation making such normal social interaction feel almost foreign. "I should review these notes for tomorrow's call," he demurred, gesturing to his paperwork. "Those notes will still be there in the morning," Davidson countered, removing his tie and transforming from manager to just another member of the team. "The celebration is part of the job too, Sullivan. And don't worry about transportation," Carlos added perceptively, perhaps guessing one of Michael's concerns. "We all take ride shares on shop celebration nights. Shop policy," surrounded by expectant faces that now looked at him with genuine collegiality rather than curiosity or skepticism. Michael realized this moment represented another threshold in his reintegration. The professional acceptance had been crucial, but this social inclusion addressed a different kind of isolation he'd been experiencing since his injury. "All right," he agreed with a small smile. "But fair warning, Marines aren't known for buying cheap rounds when it's their turn." The team's appreciative laughter and friendly debate about favorite drinks carried them out the door and into the evening, leaving the Bugatti safely secured in Elite's specialized storage bay. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and high-visibility pressure with Donovan's call, but tonight was about cementing the human connections that transformed a workplace from merely functional to genuinely supportive. As they walked toward their cars, Michael glanced back at the shop, a building he had entered just 2 weeks ago as an invisible janitor and now exited as a valued specialist heading to celebrate with colleagues. The journey from isolation to inclusion had been improbable but undeniably real, proving that expertise could indeed be found in the most unexpected places if only someone took the time to look past appearances and assumptions. The morning light streamed through Elite Performance Motors' windows, casting a golden glow across the midnight blue Bugatti Chiron that dominated the main service bay. Michael arrived early, as was his habit, to prepare for the video call with Alexander Donovan. The events of the previous evening, sharing drinks with colleagues who now treated him as one of their own, had left him with an unfamiliar sense of belonging that made the shop feel different somehow. He reviewed his diagnostic notes meticulously, organizing the documentation of the composite delamination issue and the repair process into a clear presentation. Photographs taken at various stages showed the nearly invisible defect that had eluded Bugatti's own technicians, along with the specialized repair Jason had performed. Jason arrived next, looking slightly worse for wear after last night's celebration, but immediately focused on preparing the Bugatti for its final inspection. "How's the leg this morning?" he asked casually, noticing Michael's slightly more pronounced limp. The simple acknowledgement of his disability without awkwardness marked another subtle shift in their professional relationship. Previously, everyone except Davidson had pretended not to notice when Michael's prosthetic caused him discomfort. "Manageable," Michael replied honestly. "Long days make for stiff mornings." Jason nodded, neither offering unnecessary sympathy nor ignoring the reality. "My shoulder does the same since the motorcycle accident 3 years ago. The weather changing makes it worse." He rolled his right shoulder demonstratively. "Let me know if you need to tag out during the presentation. I can cover the technical repair details while you take a break." The offer of practical accommodation without pity struck exactly the right note. "Appreciate it," Michael said simply. By 9 o'clock, the entire team had assembled in the conference room Davidson had equipped with video capabilities for the call. The Bugatti's specialized diagnostic system had been connected to the main display, showing comprehensive data from overnight monitoring. Michael sat at the center of the table with Jason and Davidson flanking him, while the other technicians arranged themselves around the room, Nervous, Carlos whispered, as they waited for the connection. Michael considered the question seriously. Not about the technical aspects, he decided. We found a real issue and resolved it correctly. I am unaccustomed to this level of visibility, though. During his military career, Michael had regularly briefed commanding officers on vehicle readiness and repair status, but always within the structured hierarchy where his role was clearly defined. The spotlight that came with Donovan's attention represented an entirely different kind of pressure. The screen flickered to life precisely at 9:05, revealing Alexander Donovan in what appeared to be a luxurious home office. He wore a casual but clearly expensive sweater, projecting relaxed confidence. "Davidson, Sullivan," he greeted with a nod. "I've got Pierre Lafontaine from Bugatti Technical joining us. He's particularly interested in what you found." The screen split to include a second video feed showing a serious-looking man in a pristine workshop environment with Bugatti logos visible on the wall behind him. "Good morning," the Bugatti representative said with a slight French accent. "Mr. Donovan has made some extraordinary claims about your diagnostic capabilities. I am, how you say, skeptically curious." Davidson glanced at Michael, silently encouraging him to take the lead. Michael straightened, instinctively adopting the clear, fact-based reporting style that had served him well in the military. "We identified a minor delamination in the rear carbon fiber diffuser," he began, signaling Carlos to advance to the first detailed photograph. The defect was visually imperceptible under normal conditions, but would manifest as vibration once airflow velocities reached approximately 180 miles per hour, creating aerodynamic instability. He proceeded methodically through the diagnosis, explaining how the issue had been detected and verified. As he spoke, the Bugatti representative's expression shifted from polite skepticism to genuine interest, particularly when Michael referenced similar composite material behaviors he'd encountered during military service. "This precise location," Lafontaine interrupted, leaning closer to his camera as Michael highlighted the affected area, "it is subjected to particular stress during high-speed cornering. Our standard diagnostic protocols do not typically include visual inspection of this specific section because computer models suggest minimal load concerns." "With respect," Michael replied carefully, "computer models calculate ideal conditions. In practical application, manufacturing variations, though within tolerance individually, can combine to create unexpected stress concentrations." The Bugatti representative's eyebrows rose slightly. "You have background in composite engineering?" "No formal engineering degree," Michael acknowledged. "My experience comes from practical field diagnosis of aircraft composite components under combat conditions, where theoretical models often required real-world adaptation." Lafontaine nodded slowly, reassessing the man before him. "And the repair method?" Jason smoothly took over this portion, detailing the specialized carbon fiber repair procedure he'd performed using Bugatti's proprietary resin system. His confident explanation of the exacting temperature control and application techniques clearly impressed the Bugatti technician. "The repair meets all factory specifications," Jason concluded. "We've monitored the curing process overnight, and all structural integrity tests show results consistent with original manufacturing parameters." "Impressive," Lafontaine conceded. "May I ask how you obtained Bugatti certification?" "I do not recall. Authorizing training for technicians at your facility. I completed the certification program last year through the Advanced Technical Exchange in Munich," Jason explained. "It was personally sponsored by Dr. Heinrich Weber." The name drop of Bugatti's legendary technical director caused Lafontaine to reassess Jason as well. "Dr. Weber is selective about his protégés. You must have demonstrated exceptional aptitude." Donovan, who had been silently observing the technical exchange with evident satisfaction, finally spoke. "So you're confirming that Sullivan's diagnosis was correct, and that your standard protocols missed it?" Lafontaine hesitated, professional pride briefly warring with intellectual honesty. "It appears so," he finally acknowledged. "Mr. Sullivan's detection of this particular defect represents an unconventional but valuable diagnostic approach. We may need to re-evaluate our inspection protocols for vehicles operating consistently at extreme performance thresholds." The admission from Bugatti's own technical representative sent a ripple of suppressed excitement through Elite's team. Michael maintained his professional composure, but inwardly felt a profound validation of his capabilities. "I'd like to propose a follow-up," Lafontaine continued unexpectedly. "Would Mr. Sullivan be willing to document his inspection methodology for our engineering team? With appropriate compensation for intellectual contribution, of course." Before Michael could respond, Donovan interjected. "That sounds like Bugatti recognizing they've been out-diagnosed by a small, independent shop." His tone was light, but carried an unmistakable note of triumph. "I'd say that's worth discussing, through appropriate channels that protect Elite's competitive advantage." Davidson skillfully navigated the suddenly complex business terrain. "We'd certainly be open to professional collaboration that benefits both parties. Perhaps we could explore this further after you've had an opportunity to test the vehicle, Mr. Donovan." The conversation concluded with arrangements for Donovan to collect the Bugatti that afternoon, followed by a more detailed discussion of potential collaboration once the vehicle's performance had been verified under high-speed conditions. When the call ended, Davidson looked around at his team with undisguised pride. "That," he announced, "is how you establish elite performance motors in the ultra-premium market. Outstanding work, everyone, especially you, Sullivan and Reed." The use of both their names, linked as equals, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As the team dispersed to prepare for Donovan's arrival, Michael found himself momentarily alone with Davidson. "Bugatti's interest in your methodology is significant," Davidson observed. "That doesn't happen often." "It was a team effort," Michael replied automatically. "Jason's certification was crucial." "True, but your diagnosis was the breakthrough." Davidson studied him thoughtfully. "How are you adjusting to all this? It's been quite a transformation in just 2 weeks, from pushing a broom to having Bugatti technicians requesting your expertise." Michael considered the question seriously. "It's still processing," he admitted. 3 years of being overlooked or dismissed because of this," he gestured to his prosthetic, "conditioned me to expect limitations rather than opportunities. And now I'm remembering who I was before the injury," Michael said slowly. "Not just the technical skills, but the confidence, the sense of purpose, the belief that my contribution matters." Davidson nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "That's exactly what I saw possibility for when you spoke up about the Maserati. Not just technical ability, but the whole person that combat veterans often lose touch with during difficult transitions." The insight surprised Michael. "You recognized that from the beginning." "My father was Vietnam era," Davidson explained. "Came home with a Purple Heart and invisible scars. Took him years to find his footing. When I inherited this business from him, I promised to keep an eye out for veterans who needed not just a job, but the right opportunity to reconnect with their capabilities." He smiled slightly. "Though I'll admit I underestimated your potential when I assigned you to janitorial duties." The afternoon brought Alexander Donovan back to Elite, this time accompanied by 2 associates who surveyed the shop with evaluating eyes. Michael recognized the careful assessment of potential investment opportunity. These weren't just friends admiring a car. They were business people considering the shop's capabilities. "Sullivan," Donovan called, breaking away from the others to approach Michael's workstation. Before I take the Chiron, I wanted to discuss something privately. They moved to Michael's small office, where Donovan closed the door and got straight to business. LaFontaine called me after our video session. Bugatti is seriously impressed. Both with your diagnostic catch and with how quickly you identified a defect their specialized technicians missed repeatedly. Michael nodded, waiting for Donovan to continue. I'm hosting an exclusive tech gathering this weekend. 20 of the most influential innovators in Silicon Valley, all bringing their highest performance vehicles. Think of it as a private concours event combined with spirited driving on a closed course. Donovan leaned against the desk casually. I want elite performance to provide on-site technical support, with you personally handling diagnostic oversight. The scale of the opportunity was immediately apparent. A single weekend could establish Elite's reputation among the exact high-net-worth clientele Davidson had been pursuing for years. That would be Mr. Davidson's decision, Michael replied carefully. Already discussed it with him. He's on board, contingent on your agreement. Donovan studied him with shrewd assessment. The event includes some challenging logistics. Helicopter, transport to a private estate, long hours, technical demands across multiple exotic manufacturers. Comfortable accommodations would be provided, of course, but it's not exactly a standard service call. Michael understood the unspoken question about his physical capabilities. My prosthetic wouldn't prevent me from performing any necessary diagnostics, he stated matter-of-factly. I would need brief periods to manage comfort, but nothing that would impact responsive service. Good, Donovan nodded, seeming satisfied. Because beyond this weekend, I'm considering establishing an ongoing relationship with Elite, potentially including equity investment to expand your specialized diagnostic services. Davidson mentioned you've been developing a comprehensive methodology drawing from your military experience. The conversation had suddenly veered into unexpected territory, with implications far beyond a weekend service arrangement. Michael chose his words carefully. We're documenting integrated diagnostic protocols that combine traditional methods with techniques I developed during military service. The approach is particularly effective for intermittent issues conventional diagnostics might miss. That's exactly the kind of innovation I look for, Donovan replied. Most established services become complacent, relying too heavily on manufacturer-provided diagnostics. Your military background brings a different perspective that clearly produces superior results. He straightened, moving toward the door. Think about the bigger picture while you're at our event this weekend. I believe there's potential for something significant here. After Donovan departed with the Bugatti, purring flawlessly under his command, Davidson called an impromptu meeting to discuss the weekend opportunity and its broader implications. This is unprecedented, he told the assembled team. Access to 20 ultra-high net worth potential clients in a single weekend, plus Donovan hinting at possible investment. He looked around the room. I'd like to send a 4-person technical team, Sullivan for diagnostics, Jason for certified repairs, Carlos for support, and myself for client relations. The selections made professional sense, though Michael noted the disappointed expressions from those not included. Davidson addressed this directly. For those remaining here, expect increased regular business as word spreads. This opportunity benefits the entire shop, regardless of who attends the actual event. Planning for the weekend consumed the remainder of the day, with specialized tools identified and mobile diagnostic equipment prepared for transport. Throughout the preparations, Michael found himself contemplating Donovan's hints about larger opportunities and investment. As the shop prepared to close, Jason approached Michael's workstation with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course." Jason seemed to struggle with what he wanted to say, finally settling on directness. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not the half-hearted acknowledgement from before." When you first moved from janitor to specialist, I was threatened. Worried you'd replace me in the hierarchy here. The admission clearly didn't come easily to someone accustomed to being the undisputed technical authority. Understandable, Michael replied simply. New dynamics always create uncertainty. Maybe, but my response was unprofessional. Jason looked him directly in the eye. What I've realized this past week, especially during the Bugatti diagnosis, is that your expertise doesn't diminish mine. It complements it. You see things I don't because of your different background, and I know certification details you haven't been exposed to yet. The insight reflected genuine growth in Jason's perspective. Together we provide better service than either of us alone, Michael agreed. Exactly. Jason nodded emphatically. And that's the part I missed initially. I was so focused on maintaining my position that I didn't see the potential for all of us to advance together. He extended his hand. Partners in this weekend venture? Michael accepted the handshake, recognizing it as more than just a gesture toward this specific event, but as a reset of their professional relationship on more solid footing. Partners, he confirmed. As they finished securing the shop for the evening, Michael paused by the entryway where he'd swept floors just 2 weeks earlier. The transformation of his circumstances had been so rapid and complete that those days already felt like distant memory. Yet the lessons from that time remained valuable. Being overlooked had taught him to see what others missed, both in mechanical systems and in people. Being dismissed had honed his patience and determination. Being underestimated had given him perspective on the assumptions people make based on appearances and titles rather than demonstrated capability. Now, as he prepared to step into an opportunity that could potentially reshape not just his career, but the entire direction of Elite Performance Motors, Michael recognized that his journey from invisible janitor to respected specialist was more than just a personal vindication. It represented something broader about human potential and second chances, about how expertise can be found in unexpected places if someone is willing to look past superficial judgments and recognize the value that exists beneath the surface. With that thought firmly in mind, he turned off the lights and locked the door behind him, ready to face whatever challenges the weekend and the future beyond it might bring. The sleek Bell 429 helicopter descended toward a sprawling estate, nestled in the Santa Cruz Mountains, offering Michael a breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean in the distance. The exclusive property belonged to Alexander Donovan, its expansive grounds now transformed into a luxury automotive gathering unlike anything Michael had ever experienced. Below, a collection of the world's most exotic vehicles gleamed in the California sunshine, each representing engineering excellence and wealth beyond imagination. "Impressive, isn't it?" Davidson shouted over the helicopter's whine as they began their approach. "Donovan mentioned 20 vehicles, but I count at least 30 down there." Michael nodded, taking in the scene with professional assessment rather than awe. He could identify Bugattis, Paganis, Koenigsegg's, and limited edition Ferraris arranged artfully across the manicured lawns. Each vehicle represented potential mechanical challenges and diagnostic opportunities, exactly what they'd been brought here to address. Beside him, Jason and Carlos pressed against their windows, pointing out particularly rare models to each other with undisguised enthusiasm. The invitation to this ultra-exclusive gathering had transformed Elite Performance's entire team dynamic. Even Jason, once territorial about his senior status, now treated Michael as a full partner in their joint venture. The helicopter settled onto a designated landing pad, where a uniformed staff member waited to escort them. As Michael descended, carefully, managing his prosthetic on the uneven surface, he noticed several of the gathered tech executives watching with curious interest. Their attention didn't hold the pity or discomfort he'd grown accustomed to in civilian life, but rather evaluated him with the calculation of innovators assessing potential value. "Sullivan, welcome." Donovan approached, dressed casually in designer, clothes that somehow managed to look both effortless and precisely calculated. "Perfect timing. We're about to begin the technical inspection portion of our weekend." He turned to Davidson. "I've set up a dedicated service pavilion for your team. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, hydraulic lifts, the works." Davidson looked impressed. "You've thought of everything." "When you gather 30 vehicles worth over 100 million combined, proper technical support isn't optional," Donovan replied with a casual shrug that belied the staggering figures he mentioned. "Speaking of which, we already have our first diagnostic challenge. Elon's Koenigsegg is making an unusual sound during acceleration. His regular technician can't identify the source." Michael exchanged glances with Jason, both recognizing the reference to one of the tech world's most famous innovators. The casual name drop illustrated the caliber of clientele they'd be serving this weekend. "We'll take a look immediately," Michael assured him. "Where is the vehicle?" "Service pavilion. This way." Donovan led them toward an elegant structure that looked more like a luxury spa than a mechanical workspace. Inside, however, the environment transformed into the most advanced automotive service facility Michael had ever seen. Computer diagnostic stations featured the latest equipment from multiple manufacturers. Specialized tools were organized with military precision, and in the center, a gleaming Swedish hypercar waited on a pristine lift. Standing beside it was a figure instantly recognizable from countless news articles and interviews, one of the world's wealthiest tech pioneers, dressed in a simple black t-shirt that contrasted sharply with his $3 million vehicle. "Here's our diagnostic team," Donovan announced. "Michael Sullivan leads their specialty diagnostics. He's the one who found the defect in my Bugatti that the factory missed." The tech mogul approached with direct intensity. "Good. This car makes a high-pitched whine between 4,000 and 5,000 RPM. 3 separate technicians have blamed the transmission, the differential, and the bearings, respectively. None of their fixes worked." Michael nodded professionally already, transitioning mentally into diagnostic mode. "How long has the sound been present?" "Approximately 300 miles. Started after a particularly aggressive track session at Laguna Seca. May I?" Michael gestured toward the vehicle. "Please." For the next 40 minutes, Michael methodically examined the Koenigsegg, while Jason documented his process and Carlos prepared specialized tools as needed. The hypercar's complexity made the Bugatti seem straightforward by comparison, but Michael approached the challenge with the same systematic analysis he'd applied to military vehicles under far less luxurious circumstances. "The sound is coming from the intercooler system," he finally announced, pointing to a nearly inaccessible component. "There's a microscopic crack in the housing that's causing a harmonized vibration under specific load conditions. The crack only opens at certain boost pressures, which is why it's intermittent and why previous diagnostics missed it." The tech founder's expression remained neutral, but his intense focus suggested he was mentally evaluating Michael's conclusion against the symptoms he'd experienced. "That's a definitive diagnosis. You sound certain." "I am," Michael confirmed without hesitation. "Based on what evidence?" "The acoustic signature changes with boost pressure but not with transmission load. I can demonstrate using this recording equipment." Michael played back the subtle variations he'd captured during the testing. "Additionally, there's a temperature differential around the affected component that indicates escaping pressure, but only under specific conditions." The explanation satisfied the exacting standards of a man known for his engineering precision. "Can you repair it?" Jason stepped forward. "We brought composite repair materials suitable for high-temperature applications." We can implement a permanent fix that will exceed factory specifications for structural integrity. Proceed, came the simple instruction, delivered with the expectation of excellence. Word of the successful diagnosis spread quickly among the gathered executives. By midday, a queue of exotic vehicles awaited Michael's attention, each owner presenting progressively more challenging issues that had defied conventional diagnosis. A Ferrari with phantom electrical gremlins, a Pagani with unpredictable throttle response, a vintage Porsche 959 with cooling irregularities. Michael approached each vehicle methodically, drawing on his military experience where unconventional. Problems had required innovative solutions without the luxury of specialized equipment or factory support. His prosthetic occasionally caused him discomfort as the day progressed, but he managed it discreetly with brief seated breaks that he incorporated naturally into his diagnostic process. Davidson observed with growing satisfaction as the technical elite of Silicon Valley gathered around Michael's workstation, watching with genuine interest as he explained his findings. These weren't just wealthy hobbyists. They were engineering-minded innovators who recognized exceptional technical problem-solving when they saw it. "Your diagnostic specialist is remarkable," one venture capitalist commented to Davidson as Michael identified a subtle manufacturing defect in a limited production McLaren Senna. "Does he consult independently?" "Sullivan is an integral part of elite performance," Davidson replied carefully, recognizing the potential poaching attempt. "His methodology is being integrated throughout our service protocols." By late afternoon, Michael had diagnosed 14 separate issues across 11 vehicles, with Jason and Carlos implementing repairs based on his findings. The success rate was unprecedented, especially considering these were problems that had stumped specialized technicians at dealerships and certified service centers around the world. Donovan appeared periodically to check on their progress, his satisfaction evident as he observed the growing reputation of his recommended service team among his influential guests. During a brief lull in the diagnostic queue, he pulled Michael aside. "You're exceeding expectations," he said without preamble. "These people don't impress easily, but they recognize exceptional talent when they see it." Michael nodded, accepting the compliment professionally. "The vehicles present interesting challenges, similar underlying principles to military equipment, just different applications." "That's precisely what makes your approach valuable," Donovan observed. "Everyone else here is trained in conventional automotive diagnostics. You bring lateral thinking from a completely different operational environment." He glanced around. "To ensure privacy before continuing, I mentioned potential investment earlier. Having seen you work today, I'm ready to discuss specific terms." Michael maintained his composure despite the sudden transition to business matters. "That would be Mr. Davidson's area. I'm focused on the technical aspects." "Don't sell yourself short, Sullivan. Your diagnostic methodology is the primary asset I'm interested in." Donovan leaned against a workbench casually. "I envision developing your approach into a comprehensive diagnostic system that could be implemented across specialized service centers worldwide. The intellectual property alone would be extremely valuable, particularly if we integrate AI to help technicians apply your methodology without your specific military background." The concept was far beyond anything Michael had considered. His goal had simply been to perform his job effectively, not to develop a proprietary system with global applications. "I haven't thought of it in those terms," he admitted. "Start thinking about it," Donovan advised, "because several people here today already are. There's significant venture capital interest in technical innovations that solve luxury market pain. In points, high-performance vehicle maintenance represents billions in annual service revenue globally." Before Michael could respond, they were interrupted by another guest requiring diagnostic assistance. The conversation about investment potential remained in the back of his mind, however, as he returned to the technical challenges at hand. The day stretched into evening, with the service pavilion transformed by elegant lighting as work continued. On several complex repairs, a dinner break brought gourmet catering, during which Michael found himself seated among tech executives who conversed casually about nine-figure acquisitions and revolutionary technologies as if discussing the weather. "Your military background clearly informs your diagnostic approach," observed a woman who, according to Carlos's whispered explanation, had revolutionized quantum computing. "What specific aspects of combat vehicle maintenance translate most effectively to these hypercars?" Michael considered the question thoughtfully. "Critical consequence thinking," he replied. "In military operations, vehicle failure can cost lives, so you develop systematic elimination of variables rather than assuming the most likely cause. You also learn to detect problems through multiple sensory inputs, sound patterns, vibration, signatures, thermal variations, rather than relying primarily on computer diagnostics." "Fascinating," she nodded. "Essentially human-centered diagnostics augmented by technology, rather than technology-centered diagnostics supplemented by human observation." "Exactly," Michael confirmed, impressed by her immediate grasp of the fundamental difference. "Most modern diagnostic approaches start with computer analysis, which is inherently limited by its programming parameters. My approach starts with comprehensive sensory observation, using technology to verify rather than direct the diagnostic path." The conversation continued along increasingly technical lines, with several executives asking penetrating questions about how his methodology might be standardized or taught to technicians without military experience. Michael found himself unexpectedly comfortable in this rarefied atmosphere, not because of the wealth surrounding him, but because these innovative thinkers valued expertise and problem-solving regardless of its source. As the evening progressed, Davidson joined their table, seamlessly integrating into the discussion about scaling specialized diagnostic capabilities. Michael observed with growing appreciation how his employer navigated these complex business conversations, neither overreaching nor underselling elite performance's capabilities. "We're developing a comprehensive training program based on Sullivan's methodology," Davidson explained to an interested venture capitalist. "The approach combines specific diagnostic techniques with cognitive frameworks that help technicians identify non-obvious failure patterns." "Fascinating," the investor responded. "Have you considered broader applications beyond automotive? Similar methodologies could apply to medical equipment, aerospace, even certain manufacturing processes." The conversation expanded into potential applications Michael had never considered, highlighting how his specialized knowledge might translate across industries. Throughout the exchange, Davidson consistently emphasized the partnership nature of their approach, positioning Michael as an integral collaborator rather than simply a technical resource. Late in the evening, as the gathering transitioned to a more social atmosphere, Donovan summoned Michael, Davidson, Jason, and Carlos to a private meeting room adjacent to the main house. Inside, 3 executives waited: the quantum computing pioneer, the venture capitalist from dinner, and a third individual introduced as the former CTO of a major automotive manufacturer. "I've assembled a small group with specific interest in what we discussed earlier," Donovan explained. "They'd like to hear more about the potential for systematizing your diagnostic approach." For the next hour, Michael found himself in the unexpected position of presenting his methodology to people with the resources to transform it from a personal skill set to a global system. Davidson contributed the business perspective, while Jason provided insights on how the approach complemented traditional certification training. What you're describing, the former automotive executive summarized, is essentially a paradigm shift in complex system diagnostics, moving from algorithm-driven analysis to human-centered observation enhanced by technology. The implications extend far beyond luxury vehicles. Exactly, the venture capitalist agreed. The market potential is enormous, particularly if we can develop training systems that effectively transfer these cognitive frameworks to technicians without Sullivan's specific background. Michael listened with growing amazement as they discussed market valuations, implementation strategies, and potential corporate structures, all centered around an approach to vehicle diagnostics he'd developed through necessity during combat. Deployments, we're prepared to make an initial investment offer, the quantum computing executive stated, turning to Davidson. $5 million for a 20% stake in a new venture specifically focused on developing and commercializing this diagnostic methodology, with guaranteed employment contracts for both Sullivan and yourself. The figure stunned Michael, though he maintained his composure. Davidson, more accustomed to such negotiations, nodded thoughtfully. The concept has merit, but we'd need to discuss specifics of intellectual property rights, ongoing operational control, and how this would interface with Elite Performance's existing business. Of course, Donovan agreed. Consider this simply an opening expression of serious interest. We can arrange formal discussions with attorneys present next week. As they exited the meeting, Michael found himself struggling to process the implications. Just 16 days ago, he had been anonymously sweeping floors, his expertise unrecognized and his potential seemingly limited by his disability. Now venture capitalists were discussing multi-million-dollar investments based on his diagnostic approach. "You okay?" Davidson asked quietly as they walked back toward the guest accommodations. "Processing," Michael admitted. "This is unexpected territory." Davidson nodded understandingly. "When I hired you for janitorial work, I never imagined we'd be discussing venture capital investment based on your skills. Life takes surprising turns." "Does the offer interest you?" Michael asked, genuinely curious about his employer's perspective. "Absolutely," Davidson confirmed without hesitation. "But only with complete protection of your interests and appropriate recognition of your central role. What they're valuing is fundamentally your methodology, your expertise. Any arrangement would need to reflect that reality." The straightforward acknowledgement of his value, not just as an employee, but as the essential creator of the methodology being discussed, reinforced Michael's growing trust in Davidson's integrity. "I appreciate that," he said simply, as they approached the luxury bungalows assigned for their overnight stay. Jason and Carlos caught up with them, both still processing the extraordinary discussions they'd witnessed. $5 million, Carlos whispered incredulously. "For a diagnostic approach, that's life-changing money." "It's just an opening offer," Jason reminded him, though he too seemed somewhat stunned by the scale of interest. "But Carlos is right. This could transform Elite completely." He turned to Michael with newfound respect. "And to think we almost missed discovering your capabilities altogether." Michael nodded thoughtfully. If that Maserati hadn't presented the right challenge at the right moment, the sentence didn't need completion. All four men understood how precarious the path from invisibility to recognition had been, how easily Michael's expertise might have remained hidden behind a janitorial role indefinitely if circumstances hadn't aligned precisely as they had. As they reached their accommodations, Davidson clasped Michael's shoulder briefly. "Whatever comes from these discussions, remember that your worth was always there, whether recognized or not. The talent, the expertise, the problem-solving ability, it existed all along, just waiting for the right opportunity to become visible." With those words resonating in his mind, Michael entered his bungalow and sat heavily on the edge of the luxurious bed. Through the window, he could see the collection of exotic vehicles gleaming under tasteful landscape lighting, each representing both extraordinary engineering and the validation of his long-overlooked capabilities. He removed his prosthetic, with a sigh of relief, massaging the tender skin of his residual limb after the long and demanding day. The physical reminder of his injury, once a symbol of limitation and rejection, now seemed more like evidence of his resilience and adaptability. The same experiences that had cost him his leg had also forged the unique problem-solving approach that venture capitalists now valued in the millions. Tomorrow would bring more diagnostic challenges, more repairs, and eventually complex decisions about the future. But tonight, Michael Sullivan allowed himself a moment to fully appreciate the extraordinary journey from invisible janitor to recognized expert, and the reminder that true expertise often resides where least expected, waiting only for someone to look past appearances and recognize the value hidden beneath the surface. Dawn broke over Donovan's estate, casting golden light across the array of hypercars still arranged on the manicured lawns. Michael had risen early, his military habits persisting despite the luxurious surroundings. His leg ached slightly from yesterday's extended activity, but a careful stretching routine and adjustment of his prosthetic had him moving comfortably by the time he reached the service pavilion. To his surprise, he found it already occupied. The quantum computing executive, Dr. Eleanor Chen, he recalled, stood beside her Pagani Huayra, reviewing diagnostic readouts on a tablet. "Mr. Sullivan," she greeted him without looking up. "I was hoping you'd be an early riser. Military habit, I presume?" "Yes, ma'am," Michael confirmed, approaching at a measured pace. "Is there an issue with your vehicle?" "Not exactly." She set down the tablet and turned to face him directly. "I wanted to speak with you privately before today's activities begin." Her gaze was penetrating, analytical. "Yesterday, everyone was focused on the potential commercial applications of your methodology. I'm more interested in understanding the person behind it." The directness caught Michael slightly off guard, though he appreciated the straightforward approach. "What would you like to know?" "Your transition from military service to civilian life. How did you end up as a janitor with your level of expertise?" The question might have seemed invasive from anyone else, but her clinical tone suggested genuine intellectual curiosity rather than judgment. "The standard narrative," Michael replied evenly. "IED in Fallujah, 13 months of rehabilitation. Medical discharge. Wife couldn't handle the changes and left. Potential employers saw the prosthetic and assumed limitations. Each rejection reinforced the pattern until janitorial work became the most accessible option." Dr. Chen nodded, absorbing the information without the usual expressions of pity or discomfort such disclosures typically evoked. "And throughout this period, you maintained your diagnostic capabilities but had no opportunity to apply them professionally?" "Correct. The skills remained intact, just unexpressed." "Fascinating." She circled her vehicle thoughtfully. "Vast human potential rendered invisible by superficial perception limitations. It's a pattern I've observed repeatedly across different domains. Exceptional capabilities overlooked due to packaging that doesn't match conventional expectations." Before Michael could respond, she continued with unexpected intensity. "I declined to join the formal investment discussion last night because my interest lies elsewhere. I operate a foundation focused on identifying overlooked expertise and creating pathways for its application, particularly among veterans and individuals with disabilities." She retrieved a different tablet from her bag and handed it to Michael. "This contains information about a pilot program we're developing, training combat veterans with vehicle maintenance backgrounds to apply their diagnostic approaches across various technical fields. We have funding secured, but lack a central methodology and lead instructor. Michael scrolled through the proposal, immediately grasping its significance. The program would identify veterans with similar backgrounds to his own, then train them to apply their specialized problem-solving skills to civilian technical challenges across multiple industries. "You want me to develop the curriculum," he stated, recognizing the direction of her interest. "More than that," Dr. Chen corrected. "I want you to help design the entire framework, selection criteria, training methodology, placement programs." The commercial venture Donovan proposed would capture value from your approach through licensed technology. My foundation would create value by helping others with similar backgrounds apply their overlooked expertise. The contrast between the two proposals was striking. Both recognized the value of his methodology, but approached its application from fundamentally different perspectives. "This isn't an either-or proposition," Dr. Chen clarified, reading his expression accurately. "The commercial venture could provide personal financial security, while the foundation work could extend the impact beyond pure profit motives. I'm suggesting a complementary approach." The conversation was interrupted as Jason and Carlos arrived, followed shortly by other guests seeking early technical support. Dr. Chen departed with a simple, "Consider it," leaving Michael to transition back into his diagnostic role for the day's activities. Throughout the morning, Michael continued providing solutions to increasingly complex automotive puzzles brought by the gathered executives. A sophisticated electronic fault in a limited production Rimac electric hypercar, an elusive cooling system, irregularity in a track-modified McLaren Senna, a troublesome drivetrain vibration in a Pagani Huayra Roadster that appeared only after specific driving conditions. Each diagnosis further cemented his reputation among the assembled technical elite. Between vehicles, several executives approached with specific questions about how his methodology might apply to their own technical fields: medical device manufacturing, aerospace systems, even quantum computing hardware. By midday, Donovan had organized an impromptu roundtable discussion where Michael found himself explaining his diagnostic approach to a small group of intensely interested innovators. Davidson sat beside him, skillfully translating technical concepts into business applications, while Jason provided practical examples of how the methodology improved their service capabilities at elite performance. The fundamental difference, Michael explained in response to a pointed question, is approaching diagnosis as an integrated system rather than focusing on isolated components. Military vehicles operate in high-stress environments where failures rarely have simple, single-point causes. That experience taught me to view vibrations, sounds, electrical patterns, and thermal signatures as interconnected indicators rather than separate diagnostic paths. Essentially pattern recognition drawn from multiple sensory inputs, summarized a software developer known for pioneering machine learning algorithms. Fascinating. Have you considered how artificial intelligence might augment this approach? Before Michael could respond, another executive intervened. The value lies precisely in the human intuition element, the experiential knowledge that allows Sullivan to recognize patterns a computer wouldn't be programmed to correlate. That's what makes it valuable. Initially, agreed the AI specialist. But imagine capturing those correlations systematically. We could potentially develop an AI system that learns from Sullivan's approach, eventually augmenting less experienced technicians with similar pattern recognition capabilities. The discussion expanded into technical territories far beyond automotive applications, with Michael finding himself at the center of a conversation about how his methodology might revolutionize complex system diagnostics across multiple industries. Throughout, Davidson remained protectively at his side, ensuring that the intellectual property implications of each suggestion remained controlled. During a brief break, Michael stepped outside for fresh air, finding Jason already there staring thoughtfully at the collection of hypercars gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's surreal, isn't it?" Jason commented as Michael joined him. "2 weeks ago, you were mopping the shop floor. Now tech billionaires are discussing how to commercialize your methodology." "Still processing it," Michael admitted. Jason shook his head in amazement. "I keep thinking about how easily we might have missed discovering your abilities entirely. If Davidson hadn't taken that chance with Donovan's Maserati." He left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. "Makes you wonder how many others are out there," Michael mused. "People with valuable capabilities hidden behind assumptions or circumstances." "That's what Dr. Chen was discussing with you this morning?" Jason asked perceptively. Michael nodded. "She's proposing a foundation program to identify veterans with similar backgrounds and help them apply their skills in civilian technical fields." "Versus Donovan's commercial venture," Jason observed. "Quite different approaches to the same underlying idea." "Different, but potentially complementary," Michael agreed, echoing Chen's earlier point. Their conversation was interrupted by Carlos, who appeared with barely contained excitement. "They're ready for the presentation," he announced. "Davidson sent me to find you both." They returned to the main pavilion, which had been rearranged with seating for Donovan's entire guest list. At the front, Davidson waited beside a sophisticated digital display. The gathered executives, representing companies collectively worth hundreds of billions, settled in with expressions of genuine interest. "Thank you all for joining us," Davidson began with professional confidence. "Over the past day and a half, many of you have experienced firsthand the exceptional diagnostic capabilities Michael Sullivan brings to complex vehicle systems. What you've witnessed represents a methodology developed through 15 years of military vehicle maintenance in combat environments, an approach that systematically outperforms conventional diagnostic techniques for particularly challenging issues." He gestured to Michael, who moved forward with measured confidence, his slight limp barely noticeable as he positioned himself beside the display. "Sullivan will walk you through the fundamental principles of his approach, followed by our vision for how this methodology could be scaled beyond individual application to transform complex system diagnostics across multiple industries." For the next 30 minutes, Michael presented a clear, structured explanation of his diagnostic philosophy, illustrated with specific examples from both military applications and the luxury vehicles he'd diagnosed over the weekend. He explained how sensory input integration, critical consequence thinking, and stress testing assumptions created a more effective approach than conventional diagnostic flowcharts. Jason contributed practical implementation examples, while Davidson outlined a vision for systematizing the approach through specialized training programs, diagnostic tools, and potentially AI augmentation for wider application. Throughout the presentation, Michael observed the executives' reactions, not just polite interest, but the focused attention of individuals who recognized genuine innovation. These were people accustomed to evaluating hundreds of pitches and proposals. Their engaged response confirmed the legitimate value of what he'd developed almost unconsciously during his military service. "In conclusion," Davidson summarized, "we believe this represents a fundamental advancement in complex system diagnostics, one with applications far beyond automotive services. We're exploring structured approaches to developing this methodology into trainable systems, specialized tools, and comprehensive programs that could transform how technical challenges are approached across multiple industries." When the formal presentation concluded, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Executives clustered around Michael, Davidson, and Jason with specific questions, potential applications, and expressions of interest in various collaboration models. The enthusiasm wasn't merely polite, it carried the unmistakable energy of genuine opportunity recognition. Alexander Donovan navigated through the crowd to reach Michael, his expression satisfied. "Impressive presentation," he noted. "You've generated serious interest across multiple sectors, exactly as I anticipated." He gestured discreetly toward several specific individuals engaged in conversation with Davidson. "The venture group I mentioned is prepared to formalize their offer, significantly improved from yesterday's initial figure. They're discussing terms with Davidson now." Michael nodded acknowledgement, but his attention had shifted to where Dr. Chen stood slightly apart from the main group, observing the interactions with analytical interest. "I've spoken with Dr. Chen as well," Michael said carefully. "Ah, her foundation approach." Donovan nodded understanding. "Noble concept, though more limited in scope than what we're discussing with the venture group." "Different objectives," Michael agreed, "but potentially complementary rather than competitive." Donovan studied him with heightened interest. "You're considering pursuing both paths simultaneously, with appropriate boundaries and clear delineation of intellectual property rights," Michael confirmed. "The commercial application captures market value. The foundation application extends social value." A slow smile spread across Donovan's face. "Sophisticated thinking for someone who was pushing a broom 2 weeks ago. I approve." He glanced toward where Davidson was now engaged in intense conversation with several investors. "Your employer seems equally capable of navigating these complex waters." "He gave me a chance when no one else would," Michael stated simply. "His interests remain aligned with mine." The remainder of the afternoon blurred into a series of increasingly detailed discussions about potential structures for developing Michael's methodology into various applications. The venture capital group refined their offer to $8 million for a smaller equity stake, with significant operational control remaining with Michael and Davidson. Simultaneously, Dr. Chen outlined a foundation structure that would allow Michael to develop training programs for veterans while maintaining separation from the commercial ventures. By evening, as the helicopter prepared to return them to elite performance, Michael found himself mentally exhausted but profoundly satisfied. Davidson, Jason, and Carlos all appeared similarly affected, energized by the opportunities, yet somewhat overwhelmed by their sudden scale and scope. "So," Davidson said as they boarded the helicopter, "quite a weekend." "Understatement," Jason replied with a breathless laugh. "We came to service some exotic cars and are leaving with an $8 million investment offer and a foundation partnership. None of which existed 16 days ago," Carlos added, shaking his head in amazement, "when Sullivan was still sweeping the shop floor." The observation hung in the air as the helicopter lifted off, offering a dramatic departing view of the gathered supercars gleaming under elegant evening lighting. Michael gazed down at the collection of extraordinary machines that had served as the unlikely catalyst for this transformation. "What are you thinking?" Davidson asked quietly, noting Michael's thoughtful expression. "About invisibility," Michael replied. "About how capabilities can exist without recognition, about how thin the line is between being overlooked and being valued." The helicopter banked toward home as darkness settled over the countryside below. In the dim cabin, Michael continued his reflection. 2 weeks ago, those executives wouldn't have given me a second glance if I'd been cleaning their offices. Today, they're offering millions for my expertise. Nothing about my capabilities changed in that time, only their perception of what I could contribute." Davidson nodded understanding. The talent was always there, waiting for the right moment. To become visible makes you wonder how much other overlooked talent exists, Jason added, his perspective clearly shifted by recent events. How many other Michael Sullivans are out there, pushing brooms when they could be solving problems? The question resonated with all of them as the helicopter continued its journey. For Michael, it reinforced his growing conviction about pursuing both paths forward, the commercial venture that would validate and reward his expertise, and the foundation work that might help others like him bridge the gap from invisibility to recognition. As the lights of the city appeared in the distance, Michael felt a profound sense of completion. The journey from combat vehicles in hostile territory to luxury hypercars in exclusive settings had been circuitous and unexpected. The injury that had seemed to end his professional application of technical skills had ultimately led to their dramatic recognition in an entirely different context. The helicopter descended toward Elite Performance Motors, now visible below. The modest building looked different somehow. No longer just a workplace, but the unlikely launching point for an extraordinary transformation. Inside those walls, a single moment of recognition had altered the trajectory of multiple lives, demonstrating how expertise might be found in the most unexpected places. If only someone takes the time to look past appearances and recognize the value that often remains hidden in plain sight. 6 months after that transformative weekend, Elite Performance Motors had evolved beyond recognition. The modest repair shop had expanded into a state-of-the-art diagnostic center specializing in complex automotive challenges. Michael Sullivan, once an invisible janitor, now led a team of technicians, including several veterans with similar backgrounds, who applied his methodology with remarkable success. The commercial venture had exceeded even Donovan's ambitious projections, with luxury vehicle owners flying in from around the world, seeking Michael's expertise. Meanwhile, the foundation program with Dr. Chen had already helped 15 combat-wounded veterans translate their military maintenance experience into valuable civilian careers. Most importantly, Michael had established a scholarship program for overlooked talent, individuals whose capabilities remained hidden behind assumptions or circumstances. The program, fittingly named Hidden Expertise, proactively sought out janitors, maintenance workers, and service personnel with untapped technical potential. On this particular morning, Michael watched a young woman with a prosthetic arm diagnose a complex electrical fault that had stumped certified technicians. Clara Torres had been cleaning hotel rooms 6 months earlier, her engineering background and adaptive technical skills completely unrecognized until Michael's program identified her potential. Sometimes our greatest limitations become our unique advantages, Michael observed to Davidson as they watched Clara work. Her approach to electrical systems is unlike anything I've seen, precisely because she had to adapt conventional methods to work with her prosthetic. Davidson nodded in agreement. The talent was always there, just waiting for someone to look beyond appearances. This story reminds us that extraordinary expertise often hides in plain sight, overlooked because it doesn't come in the package we expect. Sometimes the person pushing a broom might just be the one with the solution no one else can see. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales of hidden potential and unexpected success. Leave a comment, sharing where you're watching from and whether you've ever had your abilities overlooked. And tune in tomorrow for another remarkable journey of discovery that might just change how you see the world around you.